Welcome. My name is Camilla, and I'm an equity research analyst at CFRA. Today, my colleague Emily and I will be speaking about Under Armour from both a fundamental and forensic point of view. Before diving in, I'd like to quickly recap the methodology that we use on the fundamental side. We apply an expectations framework. And what I mean by expectations framework is we conduct business and industry analysis to find companies whose shares are implying expectations that are either overly optimistic or too pessimistic. When we downgraded shares of Under Armour to sell back in 2018, one of the premises of our thesis was that the 5-year targets Under Armour rolled out during Investor Day were overly optimistic. And now I'll pass it over to my colleague Emily to speak about her work on the forensic side.
Thanks, Camilla. I'm Emily. I work on the forensic team. And what we do, our methodology is accounting focused. We look for common indicators of potentially aggressive revenue recognition or slowing demand. So when we initiated on Under Armour, following fourth quarter 15 results, we noticed an elevated level of accounts receivable to revenue in the quarter. And we raised the concern that the company was potentially engaging in aggressive revenue recognition or stuffing the channel. And this ties back into the present by the Wells notices that the company's executives received last week from the SEC. So to continue on with the present, Camilla, what are your thoughts on second quarter results?
Yeah, I thought the highlight actually was during the earnings call when Under Armour executives, they reiterated their confidence in achieving their long-range targets. We continue to believe that they're unachievable, and we did reiterate our sell rating on shares. In terms of targets and metrics that we think it's worthwhile to draw attention to, gross margin, and then also direct to consumer. In gross margin, we did see sizable expansion in the second quarter, but let's remember, the majority of the third-party off-price partners, their doors were completely shut. So we actually think the margin story is going to change in the back half. Inventories were up 24%, so we do see a lot of inventories actually being cleared through the off-price channel. And that's going to lead to some meaningful gross margin pressure we see in the back half. But looking bigger picture, we think that it's going to impede the progress that Under Armour has made over the years to re-elevate this sort of premium positioning of the brand. And then also direct to consumer, the company has historically underperformed peers in this channel. We saw back in 2019 where direct to consumer revenues were flat. And then second quarter was just more of the same. We saw some nice e-commerce numbers, but it wasn't enough to move the needle in terms of aggregate sales. What were some things that you saw on the forensic side?
It was interesting that you mentioned the direct-to-consumer weakness. What we saw is that direct-to-consumer sales per average retail store, which should approximate a comp, was down for the second quarter in a row at about 30% year on year. And what I think this speaks to is just how little ground Under Armour has gained in the e-commerce arena over the past several years. Dick's Sporting Goods, on their call for the May 2020 quarter, they noted strength in running shoes, and athletic apparel. And clearly Under Armour hasn't been a major beneficiary of these trends, or at least not enough to offset the in-store purchases. The second thing that stood out to me, similar to your concerns, Camilla, was the inventories. Again, these levels are very elevated, and when you back into an implied purchases number, that was down about 15% year on year. So the inventory levels are elevated, and the quality of the inventory is old. But you know, of course, all these metrics that we look at on the forensic side don't really matter unless you know, it relates back to the product. So Camilla, what are your thoughts on Under Armour's product problems and where they go from here?
Yeah, Under Armour has really struggled to evolve with the consumer. It's continued to position itself as a performance team sports brand, but in doing so, it's completely missed out on the athleisure trend, which we saw Nike, which we saw Adidas, their main competitors, hop onto really early. And if you look at the current COVID-19 environment, specifically apparel, we're confident that athleisure is actually going to outperform because people are turning to comfort while at home. And like you mentioned, there's also elevated demand for exercise.
Well, it's hard to see them really capitalizing on this trend with purchases down mid-teens year on year.
Yeah, you can't really sell what you don't have.
That's the
Thanks,
truth.
thanks for joining the call, Emily.
Yeah, it was great to chat, Camilla. And for all you people out there at home, if you would like to learn more about CFRA, please email cservices@cfraresearch.com. Thanks.